Mwabombeni, Mwaikaleni, Mwashubukeni, my Zambian YouTube viewers around the world. You're watching the Inspired Zambian Show, a podcast that brings you inspiring Zambians who find themselves forging their path in their part of the diaspora. These people create amazing change around the world while pursuing their passions in Zambia and truly learning who they are. And I want to bring their secret sauce to your attention. My name is Tanya Fuchs. And on today's episode, I'm joined by someone who challenges and changes leaders through education, excitement, and empowerment. But he was also my school friend from grade 5, so I just know him as Henry. But let me not do him a disservice. Mr. Henry Kasonde Musoma, welcome to the Inspired Zambian podcast.
Thank you so very much, Tanya. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
I'm excited to have you.
Oh my goodness. Yes, very excited to be here.
So, Henry, where are you right now? Let's just give a little bit of context. Where are you right now?
Well, if you mean literally physically right now,
yes,
yes, I am sitting in a hotel room in New York City.
Nice, very nice. What time is it?
It is about, it's just a little over 7, about 10 minutes over the hour at 7:10.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I'm looking out
bright and early.
Bright and early. I was invited by my dear friend here, Tanya, who, like she said, I've known her since 5th grade, and it's amazing how the circle of life keeps moving us all and brings us into each other's paths. So it's exciting to be here with you all this morning.
Amazing. So, let me kick off. Let's start with maybe a bit of background information. So your life growing up in Zambia and then your transition to the diaspora. How did that roll out for you?
Perfect. So grew up in Zambia, for the most part, the Copper Belt, and then moved to Cabo, which is where we met. And I have to give a shout out to your dad. I often talk to him. He's one of those teachers that taught for a lifetime, not just for a season.
We'll get into that later. Let's talk about your childhood.
Awesome. Yeah, because he wasn't. Yeah. Anyway, so my childhood grew up in Zambia, Kabwe, and Chingola, and both my parents worked for the copper mines. And then
were you born in Chingola?
No, I was actually born in Kitwe. Sorry.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I was born in Kitwe and in Kana East in Kana Mine Hospital. And then we moved to Kabwe. I started school in Kabwe at Jack and Jill Nursery School. And then from Kabwe, we moved to Chingola. You know, people that work for ZCCM used to move a lot. And moved to Chingola. And then from Chingola, we moved back to Kabwe again. And then from Kabwe, my dad took a job in Mozambique. And then when he took the job in Mozambique, that's when the whole family moved to Mozambique, except for me, because I was attending in Pelembe Secondary School. So I was in boarding school.
So we did Kabwe Trust School together. I think I joined around grade 5. So actually we didn't do that long because I left before grade 7. But you then moved on to Pelembe, didn't you? So
yes. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, you left before grade 7, and
I was too scared. I didn't want to fail the grade 7 exams.
You know, I was about to say that, but I didn't want to put that out in the world. You know, I thought that might be distasteful. But it's valid, Tina. Valid for now.
But that's valid, Kopo. I did not prove them right. No, it wasn't the case.
and I know the paper that you would have failed in, it would have been special for you. Yeah, I thought is to code. Sun is to light, light, darkness. Yeah, that was critical thinking 101 in Zambia.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy stuff, right? And so my family moved to Mozambique. And Tanya, actually, you know, my life transitioned in a major way in 1993, which a lot of people don't know. And I was committed to Chainama Hospital. And this is something that I'm very comfortable to talk about publicly now, because the space for mental health is really critical. And I think we are not doing ourselves a service as a people when we ignore the mental well-being of especially young folk, you know. And as a culture, I think we need to do better to acknowledge the
Tell me a
space.
bit about that time, Henry. Like what were the things that led up to that? Because I remember you telling me about this and your time in there. Like, can you tell us a little bit about it, but also the impact that it had on you? Because obviously this is all before moving into the diaspora, let's say. So, yeah, can you give us a little bit of insight into that?
Yes. So, Tanya, I'm like 16 years old, maybe. Yeah, 16, 17 years old. I'm in 11th grade, getting ready to start 12th grade. And up until then, just had lost a lot of relatives to HIV, lots of relatives. Um, then I started pursuing my faith because, I was nervous about the future. And some of my nervousness was prompted by conversations with some of my friends that would question and say, your family's dying, and well, how do you see your family in the future? And I truly didn't see any much hope because so much death. And so I started reading the Bible and different things happened. This is my recollection of it. And then all I remember is I believe that I kind of ended up in the hospital in Kitwe, the hospital I was born in. And I think this is a season of rebirth. The hospital I was born in is a hospital I'm admitted
Mm.
in. And I remember being in there. I think I was fasting, so my energy levels were really bad. And I remember being cuffed to the bed, handcuffed to the bed, and, or, pretty much tied down. And I remember my father coming, and my dad was concerned. He thought I was smoking marijuana, which is what the people in Zambia assume. First, when things like that happen, maybe it's marijuana, maybe some people think it's witchcraft, whatever, but it's just this internal turmoil of a struggle, and you know how our culture was back then. If your father died, you lost everything. People would take stuff away and they'd even divide the children as if they were property. And so that
Hmm.
was the concern I had, for myself is that, man, my
Why,
dad,
why were you putting this on yourself? Because your dad hadn't, like, why were you pre-visioning this, let me say?
when you see so much death around you, and, all your uncles and they live in your house, you see them just diminish.
Right. Okay. Okay.
And then you also look at the culture of our society and you're thinking, my dad's next. And during that time, Tanya, if my dad had a cough, if he had malaria, it was fear for me. My greatest fear was my father's death, and my greatest inspiration was my father's death. So, this idea of being motivated by something that is actually scary, because I thought that if my dad died, even as young as I was, there was this idea that I need to be something that could hold it together for my family. Because my father comes from a family of 12, and most of the people in his family were not um, of good financial means. So those
Mhm.
were that concerned. Anyway, so I was put in Chainama Hospital. But it's funny how, or not funny, interesting how life plays out. I met a young lady that was my classmate at Implembe. Her name was Lola Kaniki. And Lola Kaniki was really special. One of those very devout people of faith, but represents the best of faith. And she just used to talk to me tenderly all the time. Man, Henry, I went through a phase, Tanya, where when my parents were living in Mozambique, because they were in the diplomatic corps, I went through a phase where I had a lot of financial resources. And so as a little bit of a brat, I'd buy like colognes, like 3 bottles, just feeling cool, and was trying to identify with the patrician of society and all that stuff, the well-to-do, and realized very quickly that I was living this idea of myself, but still did not come to terms. And so Lola always used to challenge me, Henry, what's this about? And anyway, so before they ended up in China, Lola taught me a song. And that's a song I've sang and I continue to sing. It's Ichichalo Chikapita Chili Umweni Kuntu Chili. And this world is passing. I'm a visitor to where it's headed, but I just
Mm.
continue to have hope in what's happening. I sang that when I was in Chainama. I was in Chainama for 3 weeks, I believe. I was beat up while I was in there. I was put in isolation because I refused to eat the food and it was nasty. I tell you, if you've never been to China and you're a
What
Zambian person,
happens?
please do. It is appalling. At least it was then. And
Yeah, I remember it had a really bad reputation, and it was like the messaging used to be like it's worse than jail sort of thing, you know. So it was one of the reasons it was a shock to me, like when you told me that you had been in, and I was just like, of all places for you to have been, for me it was, you know, shocking. But I've never been, so.
oh, it is appalling. And I remember waking up and there'll be men that will be naked around me, young,
Hmm.
just naked, and just kind of jerking like this,
Hmm.
And so the first day I was put in there, one of my aunts took me there, and I remember when my aunt took me there, Tanya. One of the things that came to my mind was, "Oh my goodness, this could be the end of me," because of the stigma that mental health carries at home.
Hmm.
And but one thing I said to my aunt, and it was really interesting at the time, is, and she later on reminded me, we're talking, she said, I told her in the moment that, Auntie, I know you're taking me to this mental hospital. One day I'm going to come to America, because my aunt used to live in the United States. And I said, one day I'm going to join you in the United States, and I'm going to be a famous person. I'm going to
Oh, wow.
fame one day. But this is what's happening now. And she reminded me when I was on the Ellen show later on that those words were spoken. Anyway, so I was there 3 weeks. Came out. It really scared my parents. My parents were in Mozambique, so that's why they were not able to be there when I was being admitted there. So they
Hmm.
eventually came, and the whole mental health process is very complicated. It becomes a police case, and it has to be undone. And then I left the country, and my parents were so scared. That's how come Tanya never finished the 12th grade at Impelanda and moved to the international school in Mozambique. That's where I finished my last year, and it was amazing how when I ended up in Mozambique, I started a whole new syllabus. So you move from the O-level system in Zambia, then now you're doing the IGCSE, and real quickly. But it was an awesome, awesome transition. We even had a trip to the UK where I actually reached out to you and said hello when we came on a school trip.
Yes, that's the call. I remember that call. Yeah, that's when we reconnected after like God knows how many years. I don't know how you got my phone number. How did you get my phone number?
How do I get your phone number? Wow, 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 wow. It's such a small world. And it's such a small world. I don't know whether it's maybe a student that had English connection or one of Zambians in the diaspora. But yeah, so I ended up in the UK, came back to Mozambique, then went to school in Zimbabwe after finishing high school. And when I got to Zimbabwe, I was supposed to go to Prince Edward, but I got there a little bit late. And so ended up at this private college downtown and didn't exactly care for it, doing A levels. And came home for the holidays in 1995 for Christmas holidays, December. And I came with my cousin because in Zimbabwe I lived with my uncle. And so his son came back with me, Dennis. And I had intended within myself not to go back to Zimbabwe, but I didn't know what I'd do next, because I didn't enjoy my education there, not the country, but my education. And,
Mhm.
and so as life has it, I ran into an American when I was coming from church one Sunday morning, and his name is Robert Gates. And just to give you context behind it. So I'm walking down the street, and the street is called Mao Zedong, and then the intersection is Kenneth Kaunda. I met this American gentleman at the intersection of Kenneth Kaunda and Mao Zedong,
Wow.
and I struck a conversation with him. I knew he was American because he had a bunch of cars in his driveway. And since I was a kid, Tanya, I always memorized license plates. It's the weirdest thing. And so I knew all the license plate numbers for the diplomatic corps and who they were ascribed to. So, 027 was the United States. And
Interesting.
so I struck a conversation with him, and pleasant man. And I remember we were walking down the street going towards the Indian Ocean. You could see the Indian Ocean at the top. Then there's all these embassies lined up on the street. We're just talking. He goes, "Well, son, you speak pretty good English," because Mozambique is Portuguese. And he was surprised, a young African who spoke English in that country because the background. And he said, "Have you ever thought about going to school in America?" And I'm looking at him. I'm thinking the only person that I knew, Tanya, at the time that had gone to America from my high school in Mozambique was this young Indian lady, Bonnie. And her dad was a professor, so she had really good connections. She took the SATs and all that stuff that's required. Just felt overwhelming to even think about. At that time, I was thinking about going to school in Botswana, South Africa, or Lesotho. And so he said, "Have you thought about going to school in America?" I said, "No, I hadn't." And then he said, "Well," he pulled out a business card out of his pocket. He said, "Come see me tomorrow at my office." And Tanya, I'm sitting there going, "Okay, yeah." And that day, I was so excited. This man did not give me a promise. He gave me an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of us are looking for promises when
Mm-hmm.
pretty much what we need is an idea. And I mean, I went to bed that night. I was like, "America, America, God said, not doing barato for we don't know, but too much to if I try."
Wow.
So anyway, that's how this. So this is now about January of 1996, December-ish that time, and 8 months later, I was in the United States.
Wow.
This
And
man,
how old were you then?
I arrived in the United States when I was exactly 20 years old and a week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. So then, so what school did you attend, and so what led you to now being a professor? How did that transition happen?
Oh wow. No. So I want to put it out there that I did not go to the United States with the intention of being a professor. When I came to the United States, Tanya's pretty funny, the things that we use to give ourselves direction, if you will. When I was in Zambia, in about ninth grade, I did a science fair with jets. And my friend Chushi and I did a project, and we were second at the national event of jets at UNZA. It was a big deal. Kids from all over the place. We were there, and we were second. We were runners up. And the book that I won, the prize was a book on agriculture. And so in my mind, it's agriculture in Southern Africa. I internalized that for myself to say, the president was there to celebrate us as young scientists, if you will. I thought, yeah, I'll study agriculture. And so when I came to the United States, I went to Tyler Junior College. And the reason why I went to Tyler Junior College, the American that we met gave us the advice to say it would be financially sustainable because my parents were paying my education to start off at a community college, then to transition to a 4-year school in the United
Interesting.
States. So that's why I did that. And the reason why I picked Tyler Junior College because they had an agricultural program. I was going to be an agricultural engineer. That was why I came to the United States. America! And I remember arriving here on August 18th, 1996 with a backpack, a suitcase, and $7,000 in cash. And when my dad gave me that money, that's the most money I'd held in my lifetime.
Ever, exactly. That was a lot of money back then. I mean,
Yes.
for somebody your age. I mean, obviously, like in terms of like transitioning to a new country doesn't seem like a lot of money, but it's also a lot of responsibility to spend that money wisely,
He gave me 7,000, and I remember when I was getting on the plane. And at that time, my dad was a diplomat, so he could walk through the airport all the way to see me off Swaziland. I caught my first flight in Swaziland, and I remember my dad at the door. He shook my hand and he said something like, "You can make it or break it. You could make it or break it." I remember those words. Got on the plane, and the first lady I sat next to on that flight was a South African woman, a middle-aged lady who said to me, "Son, where are you going? I saw your dad really walking by." I said, "I'm going to America." And she happened to have been educated in America, and so she gave me a briefing on life in America. It was just like, I feel like just divine
Intervention.
Yeah. And so just beautiful the way it started. And I ended up I arrived in Tyler August 18th, 1996. And guess what, Tanya? This was before internet. So I didn't know where I was going. I hadn't received any pictures of the university. I just took a leap of faith. They sent this black and white stuff that wasn't very detailed. So I remember arriving in the United States at the airport. And one of the first experiences I remember is seeing another Black person on a little train at the airport and expecting them to speak Bemba. And looking at them, I'm like, and then they were like, Tom, 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 Tom. That's how they sounded, because I'm new here. Tom, 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 Tom. Yeah, Tom, 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 Tom. I'm like, man, stop singing, say something.
I know what you mean, and we had our perceptions of the American accents, obviously, because we grew up on videotapes. VHS tapes was our uh, entry to the world, wasn't it? Really, because there was no internet and all of that, so we had a perception of the American accent. But yes, yeah.
Yeah,
So take me through to, like, how did you then become a professor, and then the work that you started doing?
perfect. So then I started off at Tyler Junior College to study agriculture engineering. Thank you for keeping me on track. And then through the process of my first year of studying in the United States, I was going to go to Cornell University. That's the other piece. My dad had gone to Harvard about 2 years before and attended some international economic policy training. So he was very impressed with Harvard. And so the whole Ivy League thing became a thing for
Mm-hmm.
him. And so I was going to go to Cornell. And then it's amazing how life plays out. When I came to Tyler Junior College, I met a professor by the name of Dr. Alan Barnes. And he told me about a school called Texas A&M. Never heard of it before. And it's one of the top agriculture schools in the world. They actually have had a couple of Nobel laureates. One of them, Norman Borlaug, who I had the privilege of meeting, got the 1972 Nobel Peace Prize for the Green Revolution, which totally changed the production of wheat across the globe.
Interesting.
And actually had a nice meeting with that man. An amazing but very humble human being. So I was going to study ag engineering, but when I got here, went to A&M, then met this professor who told me about Texas A&M, and then a very kind American family gave me a car to drive to Texas A&M to go see for myself. So I've had a lot of just goodwill, and so I drove to Texas A&M, and Tanya, when I arrived on the campus, it was just huge, just land-wide buildings, 50,000 students. The whole town was made up of the school, and I met a man by the name of Dr. Win Rosser.
It's like a small town, 50,000 people.
And it's now up to over almost 70,000 right now.
Wow.
I met a man by the name of Dr. Rosser, Win Rosser. He became my advisor, academic advisor, and he started to advise me about my education. So I went back to Tyler Junior College, and I thought, well, I want to study ag engineering. Remember when I was in high school, the responsibility of family? It's always a thread in my life. Yes, and like most Zambian people, we always have this connection to our roots that iwengo wa Zambia te fiobeweka,
Mm.
olongo watolupia te fiobeweka, and like a rising tide lifts up something. Anyway, so I then thought, well, if I study engineering, it's going to take me about 5 years, but if I switch to ag policy, it will take me 4. So I switched and studied ag policy. So I did international agriculture development, with emphasis in economics and soil and crop science. And I was going to be this international guy, United Nations, World Bank, FAO, working at the area of policy. And I chose to be a generalist. I didn't want to be too specific because I felt like where we were, and I think where we still are, we need people that can look at the issue from a wider perspective than a very narrowed, laser focused space.
Yeah.
I felt like that was a luxury. So I studied that. Then I finished my bachelor's degree, and as it is, as an immigrant, couldn't find work. Even though I had authorization to work in the United States, I couldn't find work. So I decided to get my master's. And Tanya, it's crazy how life plays out. During the course of my undergrad years, I was playing racquetball, which is squash, right? And it was on spring break at my university. And Tanya, what are the odds I'm singing the Zambian national anthem, just being silly, like just loud, just. And this gentleman walks up to me, goes, "Are you from Zambia?" And I'm like, "Whoa, who in Texas knows the Zambian national anthem?" And he says, "My name is Dr. Rick Giardino. I am the Dean of Graduate Studies at this university, my university." And
Wow.
I was a professor at UNZA in 1970.
No.
Yes. And then he says, "I want you to come to my home for dinner." He invites me
Oh.
to dinner. We realized that he was my father's instructor at UNZA at one point.
Wow.
And Tanya, I'm going to tell you something. I have stopped calling myself Henry because my name is Kasonde, which was given to me by my family. And Kasonde means akachalo akanon.
Okay. I was going to ask you that because I've noticed like your LinkedIn, you've got Kasonde Musoma. And it was one of the things I just wanted to dive into. Like, why have you chosen to go with that name? So, anyway, carry on. Yes.
Yes. So at this point, this man invites me into his home and his wife and family, and they become family. And at the point that I decide to go to grad school, guess who helps me out with my graduate school? He does.
He does.
So I end up being a research assistant and start my master's degree. And finish my master's degree. Then I meet a lot of good friends. I graduated in 2002 on, I believe that was December 20th with my master's degree. I did my research in Zambia, so I still have this tie to Zambia. I went to Mpongwe and I worked with the Commonwealth Development Corporation, which is an English, the investment wing of the British government. And a huge farm. We grew the largest producer of wheat in Zambia.
Interesting.
And so my research was to find out, I wanted to find out how we could bridge the gap, the technology gap in terms of agriculture from this massive commercial farm to benefit the small scale farmer in that area. And so I interviewed all the chiefs. I met all the chiefs in the area, interviewed small scale farmers. I was trying to see how can we use education, how can we, translate this information down to the benefit of the small farmer. And it was a good time. I spent about 3-4 months doing my research, came back to the US, and then at the time met Tyra, and then she and I both graduated on December 20th. She graduated with her bachelor's degree, and I graduated with my master's. And then we decided to get married immediately after. So graduated December 20th and decided to get married December 31st. And so, we were trying to take advantage of the flowers from Christmas in the church so we didn't have to decorate them. And it helps.
Every little helps.
Thank you, Jesus. And so we got married December 31st, and she's an architect, so we moved to the Dallas area. She got her job first, and I was kind of in limbo. I didn't know what my next step was. And, that season, I think, is the most definitive season of my life. Grew up privileged, and for the most part, back home. Then now all of a sudden you're in the diaspora, you can't find work, you're married, and Kongola. Zambians very strategically. My 11 30 common. In fact, for 11:59 and 30 seconds. Now let's look at that. Sausage. Sausage. This sausage is about to be reduced into 4 parts. So anyway, so we moved to Dallas, and Tanya, we lived in a tiny little apartment. We didn't even have furniture. We didn't even have a bed. Also broke. We slept on one of those like mattress things that you just buy in the store, like for camping. And so I got really in touch with myself, because up until now you're privileged and life's going well, so even very judgmental of people that struggle, then you start to see struggle in your own life, and so I like to say that I have a speech that I usually give, and it's called "Where You Are Is Not Who You Are," and that speech was born out of that space, that time, and so I'm driving one day on the streets, and I drive by this restaurant called Papado's Seafood, and I see an Ethiopian friend of mine, actually Eritrean, and she is pulling into this restaurant, and she and I went to college together. So I do a U-turn to go talk to her, and she says, "Henry, they're hiring at Papado's. You should think about being a waiter." Then in my mind, I'm thinking, Iwe, bachelor's degree. That's a master's.
Masters.
If way.
Son of a diplomat.
If Actually, na wait na try fine. Me, as my grandfather said, it's impossible. That's why my grandfather said it's impossible.
You're killing me.
Tanya, the level of arrogance, and sometimes
I had a similar thing. I remember when I came back from Spain and like trying to get back into work, and a lot of people who come to the UK, obviously they do a lot of care work. And I remember I remember like I couldn't get a job. I think for a few months, you know, something like that. And I remember Dad saying to me, "Just do care work." And I was like, "Care work." So I know exactly what you mean. But and I know it's a strange thing to say, like it sounds like arrogance, but it's also like defining a certain type of thing that you know or expect from your life. And for me, I was like, I know that I'm not going down that road. Other people, if that's what they choose, that's their business, but I am not going down that road, you know? So I know what you mean. Carry on.
No, it was crazy. And she looked at me, she goes, yeah, you know, her name is Safanet. And she goes, yeah, you know, I work here. And when I'm in college, I take off. When I come back home for the holidays, I'll get back here. So I'm looking at her and I'm thinking, Tawan Chishiba, you don't know me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember leaving from that conversation saying, wow, good for you. You know, but that wasn't, I didn't, you know, and I got home. Then 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, and I went back. And guess what, Tanya? It's crazy how I went back and timed it as such that tayi ko na pwede mo school. And so I get there. And you have to listen, you have to hear this. I show up in a suit with a portfolio for the interview. And then there's all these high
For the
school
way to jump. Oh, yes.
and there's all these high school kids in denim and t-shirts like sagging. And here I am.
Suited and booted.
Not Tricala. The general manager, Greg, comes and he goes, are you ready for the interview? He's kind of looking at me, Totoya. Talking on a sheet of paper, 12
CV.
CV. He goes, are you sure? I said, yeah. He interviewed me and I started working there. And Tanya, it was 3 weeks of training. And when you're a trainer at that restaurant, you wear a red bow tie.
Mm-hmm.
I told myself, I'm not going to tell anybody about this. This is going to be something I do it's almost like a secret season for my life.
Mm-hmm.
And lo and behold, as life would have it, the first Saturday that I'm working a shift, there, so there's a lady who was my first academic advisor at the first school I attended, Tyler Junior College. And she calls my name. Now, they focus on Trey.
I can imagine.
Henry, hi. It's like, man, this is supposed to be a secret. And I like to call that time, that's when I came out. In terms of that situation, I was like, you know what? This is where life has me.
Mm-hmm.
I will let everybody know.
Mm-hmm.
And that window of time went by, and Tanya, I waited tables 1 year. I thought I'd be there 2 months, 1 year, 2 years. Working hard. And people are mean, you know, when you look at the service industry. I had a guy who used me as a pun of his joke with his date. He knew I went to college. He saw my ring. This is my graduation ring, in case you're wondering.
Right.
Wear it. And he looked at me. He goes, "Man, it's so good to see a brother doing so well." Like that's after I told him I had a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. I'll never forget. But he was part of my inspiration.
That's right.
And so then about 2 years into waiting tables, I met a friend by the name of Daryl and Henada. They went to the Potter's House Church with Bishop T.D. Jakes, which is where I went to church. And we became very close friends. At one time, we even thought about buying property together so we could get ahead. So I bought my first home ever in 2004 while waiting tables, a little two-bedroom bungalow, really cute, built in 1920. And I redid the floors, painted it, and really turned it around. And that's where later on I'll tell the story of how I made my first profits on real estate and the beginning of my needing to invest in real estate. And so Daryl, one day, and we're sitting over dinner, and he says, "Henry, you've been waiting tables for almost 2-3 years now. I think it's enough because it's becoming you." It's good to have friends that can talk to you like that.
100%.
He said, it's enough. He said, I think you need to quit and find your next thing. Tanya, I resigned cold turkey. And at that time, they offered me to be a manager. So I was going to be training to be a manager. And the bonus structure there is pretty generous at that restaurant.
Wow.
I resigned cold turkey, ended up working for this medical supplies firm as, just data entry. They were trying to become the Walmart of the medical industry. So they were just cataloging every piece of equipment that goes into a hospital. And so just every day, grinding. Then one of the things that happened to me when I was transitioning from the community college, I spoke about that earlier, to the 4-year school, I met a woman by the name of Dr. Chris Townsend. She was a professor at Texas A&M. When I went home during the transition, I told my dad that, because it was very expensive to go to a 4-year school, I said, Dad, I'm going to work so hard. I'm going to maintain straight A's. You only pay for me the first semester, the full amount, but the second semester, my scholarships. So Dad gave me quite a bit of money to pay for that first semester. Well, I think he even sold a car at the time. And so I came back, and then Tanya and then the campus, and I saw a more office, a lady. She got word that I was an African kid in the department, and she just wanted to meet me. So I went to meet her. Yeah, short little lady, kind of like your height. And just to let you all know, she's not tall. So anyway, I went into her office, and she looked at me and she said, "Hey, you're from Zambia?" I said, "Yeah." Tell me about yourself. I told her, and at that time I was very outspoken about my faith. Still am, but but I was like just. And I told her, she said, "How are you going to pay for your education?" And guess what I told her, Tanya? Point blank, didn't even think twice. I said, "God will take care of me."
Mm-hmm.
So it's very expensive. I said, "Yeah, God will take care of me." She said, "Okay." Then she looked at me and she goes, "Son, could you give me your number, your ID number? Let me just give it to me." I didn't even think why she asked me. Very trusting at the time too. I just gave her my number. The next day I get a call from her. She says, "Come and see me." I went in there, and this lady is jumping. "Henry, we did it. We did it." I said, "We did what?" She goes, "We got you a scholarship." I didn't have to earn the A's that I told my dad. So all that money that my dad gave me, they reimbursed me. I already paid tuition. They reimbursed me, gave me a scholarship. I had enough money for the year. So anyway, now fast forward to number I've graduated, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I am now waiting tables. I've quit. I'm working as a data entry analyst, and I've graduated. And then the Potter's House Church sends the volunteers because I worked for the Potter's House Church as well, not as a job, but as a volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
They sent us to Atlanta to the Woman Thou Art Loosed conference.
Okay.
Yeah. And
That's his wife's event, is that right?
It's his, because he wrote a book called Woman Thou Art Loosed. It's huge.
Okay, yeah.
It used to be huge, very big. Like we covered the whole Atlanta convention center.
Because I've seen clips of that event, that conference or whatever it's called. So I am aware of it, and I know I thought it was led by his wife, but no, my bad. Carry on.
Yeah, it's huge. And so I'm in Atlanta, Tanya, but my cell phone rings. No, I'm actually going ahead of myself. So while I'm doing the data analyst job in 2004, early January, one of the things I always tell people, your network is your net worth. Please, everybody has a net, but not everybody makes it work. And please don't use my net, because I made mine. You don't fish with other people's net. Make your own net work for yourself. So I always keep up with my connections. That's one thing I do, and I tell all my students. And so I kept up with this lady over the years, and her husband. Her husband was also a professor, and Dr. Joe. He just passed away last year. Amazing human being. I model my professorship towards that man, as I want to be what this man was to students. And in fact, not want to be, I am, I believe. I think I'm passing it forward in the way he did. Amazing. Anyway, so his wife and I were talking in January, and I was like, "Hey, Dr. Chris, I'm here, I'm working data analyst." She calls me one day, and she said, "Henry, I have applied to be the department head for the college that I graduated out of. And she said, remember how when I first met you, you said God would provide for you? She said, I'm going to ask you to pray.
Mhm.
If I get this job, I want to hire you as a professor in my department.
Amazing.
That was about January. So now fast forward back to the Potter's house. I'm in Atlanta, about June, July, at a conference. The phone rings, and it's a man who's from the college I graduated from. His name is Dr. Boyd. He calls me. He goes, hey, Henry, Dr. Chris asked me to give you a call. I said, okay, great. We have a professor position opening up, and the start date is August 1. And I'm thinking about to ask me to apply. Okay. And they said, yeah, that's your job. You start August 1 if you want it.
Amazing.
That's, Tanya, is how I became a professor. I did not intend to be a
Amazing.
professor. And so they said, it's your job, August 1 you start. You're going to be teaching, by the way, you're going to be teaching classes in leadership. I remember I came here, I did agriculture, I did economics, and I did soil crop and science. All of a sudden, life, it's the circle of life. It is leading us on, right? Simba, and so here we are, the circle of life leading me to path that I would not have chosen. I didn't think about being a professor.
Not at all.
No,
Yeah.
I was going to be. Go
So
ahead.
I'm gonna shift you forward a little bit just to kind of focus a little bit on some of the highlights that you've had as well. So basically, like right now, if I go into YouTube and then I type in Henry Musoma Ellen Show, what pops up and why?
It's me in 2017 when I was featured on Ellen DeGeneres show will pop up.
And why were you on her show?
Because I was being Zambian.
So tell the story.
Yeah, I was being Zambian Ubuntu. The whole idea of my existence depending on yours and yours depending on mine. It was a very interesting day. I think it was September 7th of 17. And this particular date, Tanya, a couple of things were happening. Actually, that year I had won the highest award you could get as a professor at that university, the April of that year. And so I had some grievance in terms of my pay, because I was being highly celebrated in terms of awards, but my pay didn't feel like on par. And so I set up a meeting with the dean of the business school. And one of the interesting things about what was very interesting is that our business school had just gotten the first African-American dean ever. And so we kind of had this excitement as minorities because, we still, as a society, we still struggle in the space of equality and equity. And so,
Representation.
so I set up a meeting with this dean. Tanya, the same day that video went viral is the day I had my meeting with the dean. So let me tell you about that.
Really?
Yes, let me tell you about that day. So I start off my day in the morning with the meeting with the dean at about 11 o'clock. And this is a meeting that's like 3 months in the making. He's a busy guy. I go in his office. Dr. Eli Jones, he talks like that, very deep voice. He's a radio guy, neat man. And it's a marketing background, by the way. It's a man you should follow. He's also written a book and is doing a podcast. Really neat guy. So I walk in his office and we're talking. And I said, Dr. Jones, I was bold. I was like, show me the money, and asking for a raise. And he looked at me and said, Henry, I can't do much for you because we're a public institution. We don't just give raises randomly. There's a procedure, there's this, but I'm going to offer a prayer for you.
Oh, okay.
You know
what I'd say to that.
Don't be rolling your eyes. Anyway. Don't be rolling your eyes. Anyway, but that day, I know I love Jesus, but I wasn't looking for Jesus that day. I was looking for a paycheck.
That's right.
I was looking for a paycheck, and I unashamedly say that, by the way.
Because I know where this is going, so that's why I'm also being light about it.
And so I got a prayer, and immediately after I left, that prayer does work. I went to my desk, and I opened my computer, and here's a note. I'm teaching a management course with about 300 plus students, a huge class. I don't take roll. I'm one of those professors, You're in college, you should be responsible for yourself. I'm not treating you like a child. So I don't take role. This young lady that's in my class sends me an email to say, I'm not coming to class today because I don't have a sitter. But can I meet you before class so we could go through what you're covering? Man, Tanya, hey, as the Nigerians would say, Chineke, 300 people. Why is she telling me this? She doesn't have, she doesn't even have to. So super committed student. So I sent her an email back to say, call me, call me. So she calls me and I'm like, oh, she goes, yeah, my sitter fell through. I said, how old is your child? I said 9 months. I was like, okay, what's his name? She told me, and I was like, just bring him to class. Didn't even think about policy, Tanya. I was just like, nothing. I was just like, bring him to class. Like I said, being Zambian, just bring the baby to class. We'll be okay. And so I taught 2 classes back to back. So 300 in one section, 300 in the second section. She was in my second section. She brings the baby to class. I'm teaching one of the most boring chapters in that course. Where we talk about the classical theories of management, and it's all these old dudes. I'm just like, even falling asleep. Every professor has one of those lectures where you're just like, I've got to do this, but if I didn't have to, I wouldn't. And so I'm lecturing, and this young little kid starts walking or crawling in front of me. And he goes to talk to the young ladies to my right. I'm on the lantern, right? And then on the way back, he's like walking back. So I just scooped him up, Tanya. And I held him like right in my arm. And then I said to the class, if you have a problem with this child being in my class, go ahead and drop my class. Because anybody who has a problem with a child, the child is not the problem. The problem is yourself. I'm glad that wasn't recorded. I think would have had.
I think that would have had an impact as well. But carry on. Yeah.
And so the young lady, after the class finished, walks up to me and thanked me and left. Tanya, it was not an event for me.
Who filmed it? Who filmed it? You've got breakfast to go to.
Okay, yeah, sure. So she recorded it.
Oh, she did. Oh, okay.
She made about a 6-second video, and I didn't even see this. Like I said, I was just lecturing. People have said, "Oh, it's crazy how people say stuff. You staged it, blah blah blah," and she recorded. I didn't even see. She shook my hand after class. She said, "Thank you," and just left. It wasn't an event for me. Now this day gets more interesting. I had a doctor's appointment after that class. That's the kind of day I was having. And I had an uncomfortable situation. And the doctor was trying to decide whether to do surgery on me or not. And I have a very funny doctor. He's a comedian kind of guy. I love him. He's just the kind of doctor that makes you laugh and relax, and then you're able to communicate.
Right.
And so Dr. English, shout out to you, buddy. Went to see him, and I had my hemorrhoids. So it was uncomfortable, Tanya. Not to be inappropriate, but just I'm telling the story because it's the reason I'm telling this. So I left there. He said, we don't have to do surgery. This is fine. You'll be okay. Got home and just minding my business. Didn't share with that, oh, there was a kid in my class. Like I said, it was not an event. And my phone rings about 6 o'clock, and it's my nephew, my sister Sandra's son. He goes, Uncle, he's in university in the States as well at this time. He goes, Uncle Henry, now I'm on the internet. You're going viral. So Tanya, guess what I'm thinking? I'm thinking Dr. English. I'm not thinking viral about anything.
Of course.
I'm thinking Dr. English. Sure, to my hemorrhoids, not to a viral.
Okay.
That's why I tell that story. I'm thinking, we want to be viral. And I'm thinking, how does Kate know about my situation? This is a private situation,
Oh my goodness.
And he says, I'm Kenny, you're going viral. Tanya, opened Facebook. At this time, maybe there's about 250,000 views on that video. And it's just ticking like. And remember, the day started off with a grievance and a request for a pay raise. So my nephew at about 6 o'clock calls me and says, Uncle Henry, you're going viral. 7:30, 8 o'clock, my sister Sandra calls me and she goes, Henry, I think we'll cover up by Ellen. She just said it randomly like that.
Really? Wow.
9 o'clock, the chancellor and the president of the college calling me on the phone. Remember, I had a grievance in the morning with the dean.
Yeah.
Now I'm getting a call from the dean's boss's boss's boss.
Wow.
And it's
As
about
in, it's gone that far? The video had gone that far?
in a day.
Wow.
Never underestimate the power of a day. So when you're wishing that today ends, you actually might be crossing out an opportunity. So live in the moment, as they say, carpe diem. So the president calls me and he goes, Dr. Musoma, this is we're sitting on a plane right now. We just thank you so much for positive publicity for the university. We'll talk later. And during that same window of time, my university was about to have a guy that was a outright movement guy, very negative publicity we're getting on race and prejudice. This guy was coming to our campus. So the story shifted
Wow.
stuff for our university. In fact, at the end of that year, the university listed 12 things that shaped the university that year, and mine was number 7.
Amazing. Wow.
Our experience. So anyway, so that was like a Thursday. Then Friday morning, I went to work. My emails were bombarded with people from all the world. Huffington Post, New York Times, German television network. Everybody was reaching out for interviews. I called my father and I spoke to him. My dad said, "Hey, Henry, don't get ahead of this wave. Just ride it out slowly. Don't do anything drastic." Really sageful advice. And then, so I accepted one interview with a local television lady, and Vanessa Croy. She did an interview, and that interview went viral as well. And so, even in Zambia. So my dad got a call from the bishop at his church, the Catholic bishop. He's like, Musoma, is this your boy?" So my father now and my mother are like, "What's going on?" And my dad said something to me that in that moment that really touched my heart. He said, "Thank you for giving us something to walk tall about." Because they'd gone through a season of life where they were really having a tough time with my brother. Or a lot of like struggle and shame. And my dad was like, "Man, thank you." And you know the kind of human being I am, just to hear those words at that point, it's money in the bank. Money in the bank. And so that was a Friday. Then next week, Tuesday, so I'm getting all this invitations, like just being hit up. So I only did one interview. Then the next week, Tuesday, I was having breakfast with one of my students. I do breakfast at 6 a.m. with my students, and to encourage them to get up early. And I was having breakfast with this young man. He's actually been to Zambia before, on a study on a trip with me, international excursion. And in the morning, I got up, Tanya, and I'm looking at my emails, and I see Ellen DeGeneres. Okay, and it didn't look formal. So it's like you'd expect some kind of splashy marketing, whatever, like catchy stuff. No, it was just very nice, clean, but not. I tell Tyra, I was like, "Man, I think I got an email from Ellen." And Tyra loves Ellen, like Tyra and my brother Aubrey too.
I mean, the whole of America used to like Ellen at that stage, like she was, anyway, carry on. She was the it show to be on, basically. Yeah.
And so I said, "I think I got," she goes, "Yeah, you're pulling my leg." I said, "No, I think it." So we went on LinkedIn and looked up the person that sent the email. It's like, yeah, it was our producer. And her name was Ellen too, I believe. And so I went to breakfast. And Tanya, have you ever received good news where it's in there thinking, because it said, "Don't tell anybody about being on the show until blah, blah, blah." But don't security. I could say secrets. You almost want to talk to a brick. You just be like, "Hey, listen, I'm going to be on the Ellen."
A leaf, anything at all.
You catch the wind in your palm, you're like, "I'm going to be on Ellen show." And so I went to breakfast and I told this student, I couldn't help it. I was like, Corey, listen, don't tell anybody. You understand? I'm about to be on the Ellen show. Like, seriously. Like, what? I'm like, "Yeah, but don't tell anybody." And this kid, he's now an accountant. He never told anybody. So I think I'm going to hire him as my personal accountant one day because he kept the secret. He never told anybody. And so, yeah, that was like a Tuesday. Then the Ellen show wanted to interview us that afternoon. They did. We spoke the next day. Then they said, "Ellen has decided that your story is so powerful. She wants to fit it in and remove somebody that was there and kind of move them forward. So we're going to fly you to LA and blah, blah, blah." So yeah, flew to LA, stayed in Hollywood area. And you know what is interesting? I have to tell this story is when I was going to be on the Ellen show, one of the things I thought is, how am I going to arrive on the show? Zambia has always been and is special to me. How do I arrive as a Zambian? Do I arrive as a professor? Do I arrive as a person who's lived in America? Like, how best do I
Represent that
present?
part of you, so it's obvious without being like,
Yes.
you know, too obvious.
So to ascendere fora fitenge, amashati, which I love, and I took some suits. And I took my university is a very significant part of my life. And the color of my university is maroon. So I took a maroon jacket. But then it was missing a button. So I decided, Boy Scouts. So
That
I,
was in grade 5. Me, I was in the lecheways. I remember that.
Cubs, do your best. Yes, we will do our best. And we've been doing our best ever since. and so, yeah, I went to buy a button, rode Uber, and right across the street from the button store was my favorite store, Nordstrom. And I thought, let me just go in there and look. I know we can get on Nordstrom. I'm looking at clearance.
Oh, we're saving money.
But what are my responsibilities?
That's right. That's
Save your
right.
money.
Look after the pennies.
Exactly. And it's not penny pinching, it's wisdom. So
Correct.
to the shopper clearance rack. And then I find a maroon jacket. And it's a gorgeous jacket.
Mm-hmm.
And I pick it out, I put it on. It's a perfect fit, 42R. Like perfect fit. And I'm like, okay, feeling it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I look at the price. It doesn't make sense. It seems low. Then I asked the lady, I said, which jacket to you, the lady? She goes, yeah, it's on clearance because it's got a tear in it. And Tanya, I look at this jacket, there's no tear. I said, no tear. She goes, well, I guess it's okay. It's just your day. That's I bought the jacket that I wore on the show that day.
Amazing.
And
Amazing.
when we were on the show, right, it's this is trivial, but it's little things for yourself. I was in such a hurry to get the jacket. I didn't even realize it had patches on the sleeves, which is extremely professorial. If you
I know. I thought you were doing the professor look, you know?
I did not even realize until later watching it myself and like, oh, what's going on?
But I did like that you wore a pin. So you wore the Zambian emblem as your pin. So there was a representation there. So what made you do that?
I wanted to bring, and I always do bring Zambia with me. I do. I am committed to my homeland. I am not our homeland. I have hopes for our homeland. I came here with the dream of returning to make a difference back home. And it's amazing how your difference manifests itself differently.
Yes.
In the way you design it. And I think one of the things that has happened in my life is that I've had the privilege of taking a lot of American students to Zambia and then being able to build those bridges. And so I used to think that I was going to be the one who physically did a lot of things back home. But now I believe that I'm doing a lot of things through my students as well back home. So there's a multiplicity effect there, And so I'm not as obsessed with the idea of just having it be
being the
person.
So these students that you take back, what's the purpose of those trips? What are you trying to engender inside them or bring to Zambia? What are you trying to achieve with them?
Number one is to shift the story, to borrow from Chimamanda. To shift the story. I think there's such a singular story about the continent in general, and so I look at my students as future leaders because I work a lot in the leadership space, and whatever seeds we could plant that have the African story retold, rebranded, if you will, I think it's a win. When our students, we move from pity to partnership, and I hate pity, Please don't pity me, partner with me.
Mhm.
And so I've had good success. A lot of my students have turned around and said, hey, um, what I saw about Africa, Zambia, I used to take them to Dubai, South Africa, and Zambia.
Right.
And that what I've seen has changed my perspective. And some students have said, I'll consider getting my MBA at UCT. Some of my students have said, I want to work in the space of doing a nonprofit to contribute. So yeah, what do I want to do? I think for me as an educator, as a professor, I believe that I'm still in the agriculture business. Is that interesting? But I plant different kinds of seeds.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And my favorite quote is, you can count the number of seeds in an orange, but you can never count the number of oranges in a seed. And so still in the agriculture business, but just planting different kinds of seeds. I'm excited about the future for these students because, you know, um, there's a lot that we can do for our country in terms of shifting the story, the narrative, and owning our story in a manner that is respectful so that we can negotiate better for ourselves. So that's exciting for me.
I think this is a common thread that I'm finding, especially with these interviews that I'm doing, that we're all kind of driving for the same thing. It's like the improvement or the betterment of what we have in Zambia. So I'm going to ask you this one question. What problem do you most want to see solved in Zambia?
Wow. I'll speak. I've thought about that often, actually. But one that really comes to mind is from my personal experience with mental health. I think that space could do. You know, I've always had a fear, Tanya, and I'll share that fear that I've had. Every time I go home, you see how there's those people that are like almost violent, naked, picking from the trash. Since I was a little kid, I had a fear. I couldn't even go in the city sometimes because there's some of them were violent and it used to scare me. Like when I was living in Chingola, there was one young lady called Julie. I think her name was Julie. And everybody knew her in town. And she used to strip and people would laugh. And I remember just thinking about what's the deal here. And even now when I go home, I see a lot of, and it looks like the numbers are increasing. Just wondering, 30, in fact, there was a young man, he just died. He used to harass me when I went to lunch. Like he knew I was from overseas. He always just asked me for money. And I had an interesting encounter with him where I gave him money and he didn't accept what I gave him. And he just
As in, he wanted more or just didn't want your money?
wanted more.
Mhm.
And those encounters, so I feel like I don't feel equipped in terms of that space with my background, but I would love to see that space better, and I would contribute in a way that is appropriate, you know. But I think mental health, when people die, like people have lost their relatives, you find somebody's traumatized from the death of their father. The next day they're at school and nobody's said, "How you doing?"
No, absolutely.
You just
Absolutely.
expect it to recover. You just go on. You
Yeah.
know,
And if you think about that time that we grew up with AIDS, it was just rife and rampant, and there was just no concept of like trauma, the suffering of trauma, in terms of the children that got left behind, or the grandparents who had to now take losing a child but having to look after your children's children. And it's one of those things, like, I know sometimes people go, we don't have mental health in Zambia, but more and more it's starting being recognized that no, there is an impact, whether you want to label it or not. And it's something that, I had a similar thing. Like, I would go back to Zambia, and like, you see the guys in the streets, and I was always very I was never scared of them. Some of them could be violent, like you said, but then some of them, like, if you just engage with them, or you can go, "Wawa pita, Posha," you answer back. And for me, it would be like, I'd even start asking, "Oh, Nishmele Bangapo," because they're sitting on the roads doing something. you know. And it's like, don't disengage and don't act like you're all that and walk away. There's no reason why you can't engage. And it's not necessarily that you have to help every person, but you also shouldn't treat them like they're not human. And I think that was the bit for me. Like I'd come across them and I'd want to give you some kind of human feeling as much as possible because they were shunned so much, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a definite it's unfair for me to speak on right now because I have no idea what is happening in that space in Zambia. But I actually like that you've pointed that out as like something that you would like to see a change in. I'm going to change tactics a little bit. I'm going to do a quick fire trivia round. So
Okay.
let's see how we get on here. There's a few questions that I'm going to ask you. Okay.
Okay. Mhm.
So first, what's your
Uh-huh.
favorite Zambian food?
Favorite Zambian food? Hey, yeah.
Fast.
Amataba ya kusashila. Sample.
Okay. Name me 3 gemstones mined in Zambia. Gemstones.
Shai Shiba.
Emerald, amethyst.
Mhm.
Come on.
Cupid Zakonia.
Iwe. Malachite. Let's go for malachite.
Malachite.
Okay.
Mhm.
Which Zambian tribe has the most attractive women? Okay, don't answer that. I'm joking. Don't start tribal wars. I want to see what your reaction would be.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Who was the Rhodesian man?
The Rhodesian man.
Mm-hmm. You should know this.
No, I don't. This is hard, Tanya.
This is not hard. This
Yes,
is
it
not
is.
hard.
Yes, it
The
is.
Rhodesian man was the fossilized human skull.
Broken Hill.
Broken Hill man, exactly. Now referred to as Kabwe, the Kabwe skull. The skull is referred to as Kabwe skull.
No,
I
way.
thought you'd get that one. I was like, let me put this one in. You should know this one.
No, I didn't know that there was Rhodesian man. Anyway, keep going.
It was called the Rhodesian man. It was discovered in 1921, so that's why it was Rhodesian man. Okay, give me one fun fact that you know about Zambia.
One fun fact about Zambia. Fun fact. My goodness, you are just killing me. It's early, Tanya. I'm like, my brain.
I'll let you off. It is early.
Fun fact about Zambia.
What one thing would you like your students to know about Zambia?
Wow. I think it's about the people, you know, just that. I wouldn't call it just resilience, but just the bounce back. Just, you know, we just, I'm like, it's a good thing and a bad thing at the same time.
100%. I
But it's
hear
just,
you.
I feel like I think it's nice, especially for wound up Westerners. You know what I mean? Always stressed, you know. And
Exactly.
it's like, so yeah. Fun fact about Zambia. My goodness, fun fact about Zambia. I don't know, Tanya. There's no fun fact about anything like a country.
There's plenty of fun. You could have told me how many national parks are in Zambia. You could have told me what's the national bird of Zambia. Like it was just a fun fact. It wasn't, you know.
I'm sure it's so much
Fun fact.
if it's much of a fun fact, or chat something I did have a funny.
Anyway, okay. So let's move on. This one. Who is your favorite school teacher and why?
My goodness. School teacher could be university as well. Okay. I'll say Mr. Lorman, and not because he's your father, but
I mean, I put that question in because that's the answer I wanted. So
yeah, not because he's your father, but because I've actually kept a relationship with him, and he and I talk very often, and he takes my calls, and we talk about everything. I mean, everything.
Yeah.
And,
I'd walk in sometimes, and he's on the phone, and I'm like, "Who are you talking to?" And he's like, "Henry," and I'm like, "Henry doesn't even phone me. Why is he phoning you?" You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's been nice to see that you have that relationship, though. You know,
it's amazing, and you know why?
Let's just to clarify for those listening, this is your grade 5 teacher.
Yeah, grade 5 teacher.
Yeah.
The man who used to who taught us how to play volleyball, but he didn't.
Who was your volleyball teacher? Yes.
Oh my goodness! But one of the things Mr. Orman did for me, I think, is I think he's the first person that gave me a consistent discipline about something.
In what sense?
Volleyball.
Okay. Yes.
Remember,
Yes.
remember how intense he was with practice?
Remember how we were committed to it, but what did that lead to? Do you remember we went from last in the trust schools volleyball to the top
Yeah,
number one team in the Cowboy Trust School, what are they called, just the
yeah,
trust schools,
yeah,
inter schools volleyball.
yes.
Yeah.
I think that was a seed that he planted, like, grit. I remember him on the sideline with a cigarette. You daft, you daft. What does he like say? Daft chat, you come out to have a daft chat, and daft koko. Daft chat. Now, Mutoroka Elijah Sakala diving for the ball, and Yenda Mutonga slamming it. Then a bit of
for
one
me for
gig.
me Beatrice, she was so small with her volley. She was our volley.
Yeah, yeah.
Her set, sorry, her set.
Better.
And then we were there trying to volley over the net. Mine was my serve.
You
Tell me,
people,
Henry, who I used to do a side serve, remember? And
yeah.
I won like 2 or 3 games in a
Yeah, because
row
you kind of
just
had
off my serve.
like a spinning kind of thing.
And nobody could get it back up.
Okay, that,
Exactly.
my goodness, that's a throwback.
Yeah.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
I remember you and I and well, the group of us, and we would just be going up and down those jacaranda roads, whatever those roads were called, and you pick up a stone and you're volleying it, and you just like the smallest random things, because I think that volleyball got ingrained in us, and like it became our thing like the whole time. You pick up a ball. For you guys, maybe there was a bit of football, but for me, it was always there's a ball, start to volley it.
Yes.
So it was quite impactful.
Extremely. In fact, some parents were like, "Oh, but Lori, my na ba chila mo. You don't send anybody baba na." And but then he
And we
also
used
does.
to practice late, didn't we? We used to have
Yes,
long and
yes,
late
yes.
practices.
And one of the things I loved is also the fact that the way Mr. Loriman embraced our community. I'll never forget this when my cousin died, which was the first personal major death in my life. She used to work at your mom's hair salon, and when my cousin Liz died, she had a very personal life end. I
Mm.
remember your dad coming to our house. Not just coming, he actually contributed. I think it was a sack of cabbages or something, but a physical contribution.
Mm.
And let's just put it.
Mm.
He was in the culture. He just
He was married to a Zambian woman. What do you
no
expect?
no 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 no. Tanya, let's give him credit. Not everybody's like that. Not
Mm.
everybody's like that.
No, 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 no. But I mean, like he understood what needed to be done, because being married to a Zambian woman, understanding what happened, because obviously we'd had our own funerals, and he knows the process of what people would go through. So I would say it's a reflection of his learning of the culture.
Wow, and his character. That spoke to me. It spoke into the ages for me, and that's why when I picked up the phone call to find him again, the phone to call him. It's amazing how little things. So this talk that we're having is about inspiration. Just inspiration, and sometimes we think this grand things, but it's little seeds. Like this man coming to a funeral. And I'm a young man, highly impressionable. Not 20 like for family years, by teacher base. So those types of things, and then of course now he and I have conversation about his dogs and all the stuff that are happening, and it's I think he would be up there in terms of a person that totally spoke to my present moment and to my future. So
Amazing.
mhm,
Amazing.
yeah.
Okay, final question on this. If you could invite 3 Zambians to a dinner party, who would you invite and why?
Okay, that's a great question. I'd invite Mr. John Monakatwe.
Who is that?
He was the first education minister in Zambia.
Hmm.
Very profound man. And I'll say this, I think also because our curriculum needs some adjusting. I hope they have. I haven't looked at it recently. Um, it didn't expose us to Zambian intellect as much as it could have. And so when later on in life, when I'm working on my doctorate, I ordered some books. You know how you do the library ordering? Just wanted Zambian authors. And I read some of his work, Mr. Monakatwe. And I thought, wow, I wish I met this man and asked him what it was like back then when there was only about under 150 Zambian college-educated people to
Mm,
nation. And there's something impressive about that. So Monakato would be one of them. Then the second person would be uh, Mr. Kapwepo.
mm-hmm.
There's so much.
Who's that?
He was he was a vice president under Kenneth Kaunda. And
Mm-hmm.
there's all kinds of conspiracies around how he died and all that stuff. But he was extremely progressive. I think he would have given us a better sense of identity if he had lived longer. I think it took Zambians a long time to come around to really celebrate us as people. You know how Nigerians and those other African countries are really into their homelands.
Yeah.
Zambia, we've evolved. It's taken us a while.
You know, Henry, recently I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about how it always it feels like Zambia is, a Zambian is backward in comparison to a Nigerian. If you think of like the Africa person, like they've just always had this more committed and go-getting kind of attitude. And I was like thinking about it, reflecting on it, and I haven't concluded it. It's just interesting that you touched on it, but it feels like their journey and the resources they have and the way that also, because they're on a continent, they have a lot of that that older, when the boat trade was a big thing, let's say like slavery, but even pre-slavery, I feel like as a people they became cultured a lot more, and by cultured I mean like this multiculturalism, and
Yes.
us being landlocked, I think we didn't have that. And so I think we were very what's the word, kind of small community, local for a long time. And I know like we have sort of like migration stories about us, but when you think about like the traffic that was coming through on ships on coastal areas and on known big coastal areas, because I was like, well, how come Nigerians are like this, like for
Mhm.
me, how do they, why do they differ so significantly,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I've been thinking about it recently, and whether it's of any value to anyone, I don't know, but that's kind of what I concluded, that they've had that ship industry thing happening for them a lot longer than we have, and they were kings, and they had pride in who they were against these other people. So I don't know what's your thought on that?
I agree with you. And you asked me early on a Zambian dish that I miss. And I think our cuisine, sorry, Zambian folks, is not as hot as it could be.
It's very simple and plain, and whenever I say to people, like even white people, try Zambian food, and they're like, it's very bland, and I'm like, well, it kind of is, but again, because I grew up on it, I don't see that. But if you cooked basic inshima, umsalu, nenama, like they're very very simple foods to cook, and they're very bland, you
Yes.
know.
And then you look at the Nigerian cuisine or Ethiopian cuisine, it's inspired by it's by the trade and all that stuff. So to your point, I think landlocked kept our cuisine local. It kept
Hmm.
our outlook local. And we've been on a journey, and it's beautiful now to see just Zambians celebrating. We're all celebrating who we are. I think we've come to fully embrace our our space.
Hmm.
And it's beautiful to even go to Zambia now and listen to love songs in Bemba. When we were young, "Takwadi kumfweni mbosha mchibemba, shari shaba kalamba." Piket Sham. Tanya, you won't believe this. I was riding my bike, and oh, I didn't say this. I live in Mexico now. And I was riding my bike one day in Mexico, and I was listening to PK Sham, and I started crying.
Mm.
Yeah. The words hit me. I never ever like gave it the ear. The words were so powerful. Try it. Ni
Yeah.
Bambaso. And
Wow.
I thought to myself, wow, I've lost so much in this whole posturing I've had of not totally embrace. So Kapwepo second, I would love for him to. Then the other person I'd invite, by the way, I'm just thinking about these now. It's not like I spent a lot of time thinking about who I'd invite. The third person was Babette Kaunde.
Okay, interesting.
Um, I would love to hear what it was like watching a 30-plus-year-old man put together a nation.
Mhm, mhm.
But she had that purview. And I'd like to say about Betushe. what was happening? What did you
Mhm.
It'd be a neat conversation, you know? Ah, all of
Mm.
Twaisa Salama Minister, Olwabalozi bafu, Lwabatonga bafu, Lwababemba bafu, Twaisa,
Mm.
Obushubalelanda, when I'm Fnapoina. I'd love to hear those things.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
Yeah.
those three. And I loved her. I don't know whether it was she was portrayed by the media or branded. There was a gentility about her. I never met her.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah.
No, and there was just this class about
Yeah.
that movie. And so I'm curious whether it was just a brand or this that was her character.
Yeah, and same. I haven't met her, but I feel like that was her character. She was a good, just a supportive wife, basically. And there's a few moments of them singing together and him playing. I think it's the guitar, and so I think it was an interesting relationship that they had. It would actually be, now you've mentioned it, now you put it in my head, I'm like, actually, I think this is something I want to look into a little bit more. So
Mhm.
excellent.
Yeah.
Henry, let me not take up any more of your time. It's been
Right.
an absolute pleasure to chat to you, as always. And I know, like, we could keep chatting because I know what we're like, but I know that you've got to go. But just final thing, if people wanted to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Where can they find me? I can be found. I've got my LinkedIn up, if that's what you mean, and also
Hmm.
Facebook. Working on a website and trying to put together a branding because I'll be releasing a book, and I'm really excited about that book. Just to kind of give you a teaser, it's about identity and owning your story. In other words, the word authority, the root in there is author. In order for us to walk in our space of authority, we have to author the stories of our lives.
Hmm.
And so, easily found on social media, but then also my email address, which I'm
When are
open.
you hoping to have the book released?
You know what? I was
Are you
hopefully.
finished with it, or are you still
No,
writing it?
no, still writing it, and so
Okay, all right, okay,
I hesitate to put a date on it, but I think that will hold me accountable. My hope is to at least have a book out by the end of this year, before the end of this year.
okay.
We are now about to release my father's book. It's actually in publishing right now. I'm
All
excited.
right, what's that? What's that book?
It's about him and his story and the village boy who dared to dream and did.
Oh, nice.
And yes,
Okay.
right now in
When
South
is
Africa, it's about to be released before October. We will have a book out there in the world.
That's amazing. Okay, that's really good to know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
wow, I didn't know. You didn't tell me about that.
Yes. There's a lot out there that's so musoma76@gmail.com is my email. Uh,
Yes, that very original email
yeah.
address.
Hey,
Hmm.
listen, it's so creative. It took me a while to land on 76. um, yeah. I have a message actually, Tanya, because you have this platform that I'd love to share if that's okay.
Please, of course.
And to my brothers and sisters, not only Zambian, but people, I'd say to you, be true to yourself. You know, live. Especially as Africans, sometimes we tend to postpone our existence for others. Where you're so in the mode of wafwa, 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 until you have really pretty much drained yourself,
That's
to death.
right.
And so live. Then number two, if you need help, get therapy. It's not a bad thing to have therapy. I think we all need help. If you're, but I was at my aunt's funeral when Auntie Jean died. I was at her funeral, and I just flown in from the States. I was super tired, and they told me to eulogize her. And then I'm about to go up there. I broke down.
Mm,
And this woman walks up to me. She goes, "The crocodile, like stern. Ulimaume."
I could
And
imagine.
I'm looking at this woman. I'm like, wow. And in the moment, I did what was culturally appropriate. I stiffed myself up and I just went. And you know what? When I did that, I don't know what all I buried in my
Mm,
and the trauma that I buried.
mm.
And so, yeah, let's be kind enough to ourselves to say, you know what? Right now, my life sucks and I need help. So, yeah, live. Enjoy your life. And find that which makes you true to yourself. And then there's a beautiful poem called "Sweet Darkness" by David White out of the UK, I believe. And he says, anything or anyone that doesn't bring you alive is too small for you. Anything or anyone that does not bring you alive, my friend, anything or anyone is too small for you. So things that make you big. And I'm not talking about arrogance, but just
Absolutely.
yeah, that's yeah.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And you and I will speak soon, no doubt. So, but thank you very much for being on the show.
You're very, very welcome, Tanya. Blessings.
Take care.